I'm going to do a long form essay here. We still can't find video editing. This is the most basic function of the entire computer. Take out part of a video and attach them in order to make one video. This should be the most basic and simple function of the entire computer, along with send the file to the other computer. You try to do that, and Microsoft has interceded, pretending to improve. They want to own the concept of email and file storage. File storage, your files, brought to you by Google. They're going to do whatever they can to try to turn this machine back into a television. But I think they underestimate how simple the code you need actually is. They don't want to acknowledge themselves because they wouldn't be able to lie with vigor. It's the simplest thing in the world, really, and it was already uh, perfected in the mid '90s. You don't build a website, you write a website, and it is just a number of files. So many text files, so many video files. You put the text file on the server, you share it, and then you put the video file as the text file as the home page, and put the video files in the text file as a at the directory at the server where you are sharing it. The entire economy is retarded, basically because everybody's using party media. You can't get on the ballot unless you're on the ballot. Um, and though there are, certain colleges of journalists with their doctors, there is no objective standard. Obviously, you could do it with just, you have 100 journalists in a union, and then you go on a list. That's one way of doing it. But after losing 25 years to this nonsense and endless noise, I mean, the machine does not work, and the whole economy is retarded because of it. You turn the thing on, and you're getting inundated with massive amounts of noise from Eurasia. The only possible answer is to certify the user of the account or the domain that is coming from in order to send an email. So it doesn't even really make sense to use a syndicate of journalists represented by a doctor, a bunch of doctors or whatever uh, uh, group that has a dossier in the public record. The only real answer is to certify the house that the email is coming from, or the e-post, or to certify the person so that I can reduce everything according to the person who wrote it. And the obvious way to list what's on the internet is by the author in the local area, which is where you get how you get an orderly presentation of the content on your computer. Everybody's got a mental disorder. Well, it's not in your brain, it's in your computer code. And the obvious way to impose order on all that computer code is to list it under the author's name in the town or the state where you live. And if you don't know the author's name, don't show me that. Don't list that one. In general, the government stays in power by creating a license to be a man or have an independent existence apart from the government so that nobody can. You need that car to drive 100 yards down the street. You're igniting a giant locomotive to drive your ass 200 yards down the road to buy a roll of paper towel. Obviously, the answer would be to have some kind of little electric car that doesn't require a license, but they try to impose a license on everything in the world because it gives them control of the electoral process. You aren't really physically able to organize an alternate party, and when you do, it's not going to be 3 parties, it's going to be 500. As it stands, there's nothing wrong with a political candidate listing all of the organizations and people and publications that support them, but the mass party consisting of a third of the entire electorate is going to become an abstraction. It makes no sense to centralize information like that anymore. You just end up creating a massive ball of noise. And I think it's pretty clear and safe to say that all the poverty in the world is entirely caused by too much noise. Nobody is asking for more stimulation. You're asking for an orderly presentation of the information. Basically, there's two things that they're going to say. One is because I eat too much. Well, you should have told me to fast on Lent. If that's the big plan, fast on Lent and then go around in the road. I don't have a network, so you're going to the McDonald's to try to do some networking. They could have told me that 20 years ago in high school, and that would have been useful. I don't have any network to work. You have your flawed network that you have to work and you have to not fall out with. Well, I don't, and I don't have the listings on the internet to go through. I've done enough spinning through the Twitterverse for a lifetime. And they won't even show you all of the blue list, the following of each person, each congressional candidate. It cuts it off after 50 arbitrary references. They want you to rub your little genie lamp. Somebody thought moving your finger this much every time you want to toggle a link was an effective action that you're going to have to do 5,000 times a day to find anything on the internet? Why do I want to swirl my finger on a touchpad? I want to push a button 5,000 times. I don't really think that there is any difference between all of these Asian alphabets that they use. I think it could easily be rendered in plain English if you weren't throwing in a tonality in a pagan-like fashion as if everybody in that nation kind of speaks in an angry way. You can hear it when the Pakistani side of India speaks English. You can hear that they're denying that they learned English from an angry person, right? They're pretending that the word is pronounced in an elevated register, and we can easily see that they are not acknowledging that the person who was teaching them English was mad for some reason. You can easily get the entire alphabet in 20 keys. I want to use an Xbox controller. That works fine. But a keyboard, like so, could have two shifters and only 20 keys, and you'd be able to punch in the entire alphabet and look up whatever website you're trying to look up. But for some reason, they prefer to rub a magical genie lamp 40,000 times a day. Now, the other explanation that they're going to give is that I watch too much porno. I don't like pornography. I only watch the diabolical kind of ritual pornography. I'm not enjoying it. I don't want anything like that I saw to happen. I mean, if you go through the entirety of those mainstream porno websites, I wouldn't want anything like that to happen. In general, when all the media that you have is pure garbage, and a certain kind of refined, boiled scum of the media dirt. The only information that you have is the worst garbage in the world, the worst ideology. So, I was reading actual diabolical doctors when I was in college. I wasn't able to find anything good. I found the odd historian with an evaluation of what's going on at the university in general, really basic stuff that, nonetheless you have to find somebody who establishes the evidence. And then I was reading a bunch of diabolical doctors talking about the physical effects of shooting scary words at people. Now, this is the most interesting thing you could possibly find, right? But it is the devil's ritual. And I'm sorry, that was the most interesting thing on Google. That was the most interesting thing that I've ever seen on the internet. I don't know how any of you can lie and tell yourself that diabolical ritual, never before videotaped or photographed in all history, that was not the most interesting thing you've ever seen. That was fascinating. That explains a lot of human history right there. As you can see, He's intentionally giving the lady a neurosis. Now, I must be the only schizo who was dumb enough to actually see a psychologist. I did not know that the psychiatrists were in on it. I thought it was somebody attacking a homeless person in their apartment complex, like a landlord attacking a homeless woman, right? So I tried to talk to a psychologist, and then they spring the trap. You didn't even know that there's this one big sectarian psychology that they call psychiatry, which is not true. Back in the day in Imperial Germany, where psychiatry, the Wissenschaft of psychiatry originates, it was considered a physical medical disability not to be able to chit chat with other people in the campus town of Germany. They're not going to acknowledge that we were waiting this long for a damn phone book. I'm sorry, it can't not be an option to just list all the web pages by the author who wrote them. Leave it off. You don't know who the author of the web page is. I'm not going to use it as a basic entry point to the media. It's not going to be an option. You're going to put everything on the internet in the local area under the author's name so I can find it. They aren't going to acknowledge that that would have made all the difference in the world, because it also would have precluded every single person in the government ever being elected in the first place, because they happen to just be the people with name recognition. These are the people who happen to know everybody and who everybody knows. And the problem is, and always was, in America, that the liberal arts colleges and the colleges of divinity that control your journalistic discourse, public discussion, are completely arbitrarily accredited. You don't have any way of establishing the credibility of a syndicate of journalists other than the numbers of them, which is not how they do it. Where am I going to find a listing such as that? Where am I even going to find a registry of the medical doctors in any given state? They don't have it. If you're not listed, you're not registered. You're certified. The state doesn't want to understand the difference between licensed, registered, and certified. For instance, they keep on claiming that they have a right to license a hotel. A hotel is just a landlord who rents for shorter periods of time. They have absolutely no right to regulate the contract between a tenant and a landlord other than the safety of the arrangement, which obviously the tenant or landlord would not enter into if they knew that it was unsafe. So really they're just auditing the information and putting it in a public system so that you can establish that the terms of the contract were fraudulent. The reason why a landlord has to be registered, and why I believe a landlord should be listed, and that is the same thing as being registered, in order to register with the public and subject yourself to criticism and run an academic institution, as the term landlord implies. It is a religious institution that is an academic institution. That means you have to list yourself in the public record so that you can be criticized. You don't need one Uber, Lyft company to monopolize all the cabs in your entire country, or Amazon to monopolize all the deliveries of anything all across America. What you need is a list that is publicly visible of cabs or shuttle buses or delivery drivers, and you can call the one you want. And you can put your own publication right next to it among the registries at the Secretary of State or at the town, and you can criticize a cab, and you can call out unsafe practices, and you can tell the prosecutor when there is a problem. Again, you're living in an excommunicate nation. Your church is offline. I realize that your laws are designed by Christian Protestant people. I realize that your legal system presupposes a church, a clerk who is impartial and puts everybody in the public registry who wants, but you don't have such a registry, and therefore your legal system is predicated upon a lie. When I put my little protestation, my petition on the wall of the state university library, they called me up as if I had threatened somebody. The 7 candlesticks that are snuffed out represent the 7 churches of Asia. You cannot excommunicate a common citizen. They're talking obviously about nobility. The nobility is a part of the government. He is a public official. It is nonsense to say that a private person is excommunicate. An agency of the government is excommunicate. A public corporation, in this case, the clerk of almost every town, which is probably the original and the only indispensable service. The most conservative conceivable government in the world. Even if you didn't have an army, even if you didn't have a court, even if everybody protected themselves by the universal right to self-defense, you would still immediately try to publish all that you know about the incident that occurred. You would still need the clerk. It is the original and the most basic function of the entire government. With the economic system that we have right now, it is impossible to recognize a government that doesn't have a town council, a town clerk, a court, a prosecutor, an army, and a national archive of records. There is no possible government without a registry in general of publications. The vote is only one kind of franchise. The franchise is freedom. It is to put your publishing estate, your corpus, under your name. It is the most basic and universal right conceivable. And all of the legislation that they do is going to be totally meaningless if the voters can't ascertain what that legislation means when they voted for that legislator. They need to then define in general interest theoretical terms the sense of the general interest concern in free communications that is at issue. The republic is the law. The republic is the public record, the public domain, and the theory of communications failure. The theory of the economics, the politics, the history of communications failure. And you have a million people imposing upon the liberals every philanthropic society and diabolical socialist, sectarian socialist corporation trying to take over the government, like the doctors. Obviously, the doctors is the fascism is just when the doctors, which is a socialist corporation, the College of Doctors, attempts to take over the government. You know, we're the liberals are the people who are trying to get everybody the franchise right. We're trying to get everybody the right to put their corpus, their publication, their publishing estate in the public record, at the town, at the Secretary of State, in an orderly list form, chronological fashion, so that everybody's name can be in the public record, so that they wouldn't be able to steal the identity of the liberals, and everybody in the world wouldn't be walking around calling themselves a radical liberal and doing all kinds of crime, because they happen to know that the liberals are the outcast people you've never heard of. Liberalism is totally universal and inarguable. Every state university has a college of liberal arts. This is to educate yourself as an historical subject to the point where you can speak for yourself. It is the same as the College of Divinity, except that they're trying to make you a priest also. So these are basic and universal rights. The government cannot possibly decide who has the franchise, because the franchise decides who is the government. And however much they impose upon us and impersonate us, and however much you denounce liberalism, therefore, it gets your attention because it is the most powerful and universal idea in the world. Because the notion that your government is violating basic principles of a liberal democratic republic is the notion that you're going to be in a giant civil war in short order. It gets your attention for a very good reason. And that is why they tried to use liberal language to sell everything in the world. And they wouldn't be able to intercede and interlope between you and the liberals you're trying to hear if like the liberals want, you would simply list everybody's publication under their name at the clerk of the town and the secretary of the state.